I'm not even joking when I say that this is probably my favorite podcast episode I've ever recorded. And it's with my really good friend, Adam Mason of the Bearded Tog Podcast, if you guys have all heard of him. I wanted to sit down with Adam. I've been on his podcast episode. He's also like a genius podcaster. Wait till you hear his voice. I'm obsessed with it. He's got the perfect podcast voice. And we were chatting about, okay, if you came on the Legal Paige podcast, what should we talk about? And he said, I want to chat about customer service and why we need to concentrate more on customer service as service providers, because it ultimately helps you in the long run to avoid sticky legal situations. And you don't have to worry so much about, utilizing your contract because you already have created this know, like, and trust and valuable customer service relationship with your client from the get-go. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about it. And then you guys, we just recorded this episode and my mind is blown, and he's an absolute freaking genius. And I cannot wait for you all to listen to it. Gold, like so many good nuggets dropped in this episode. And I really, really hope you guys like it as much as I loved recording it. So without further ado, let me just introduce Adam and then we'll get into the episode. So Adam Mason is a Washington, D.C. based wedding photographer, mentor, and host of the Bearded Tog Podcast. He loves helping photographers build successful businesses that fit within their life goals, and he's passionate about investing for creatives as well. As I already mentioned, he lives in the DC area. He is there with his wife, Sarah, son, Alex, and cute French bulldog, Cash. As I mentioned, he's an expert when it comes to customer service, and he really lays out how you can make this customer service journey possible with your clients that really puts them at ease, but obviously helps avoid some legal things that may pop up. So let's get into all the juicy details in this episode with my friend Adam. Let's do it. You're listening to the Legal Paige Podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. Okay, friends, thanks again for listening to today's podcast episode. Adam is here with us today, my good friend Adam, and he's going to talk all about quality customer service and how you can go above and beyond for your business, but also how customer service is really intertwined, I can't even talk, with legal things. Because it really, truly is on how to avoid legal situations with good customer service. Adam, thanks for being here, my friend.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see you. We're in similar circles. We're not just entrepreneurs and friends. You are a parent and I am becoming a parent at the time of the recording. So pretty crazy stuff. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's so fun, you guys. You don't totally understand the virtual world until you're in it, where I feel like Adam is one of my best friends in the industry. And we like randomly will voice message back and forth about being a parent and baby things. And he's like, well, what do you think about this product? And I have a question on this. And like, that's our relationship, not just we're podcasting together and like he runs a bomb ass business and I'm the Legal Paige or whatever. There's like way more to our friendship. But Adam, I know a lot about you. Can you tell other people about you? I'd love to hear your background from, a standpoint of somebody who may not have any idea who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always love telling people listening who I assume are, photographers or entrepreneurs starting out that like my big thing is that I grew up in a small town raised by a single mom and I was kicked out of college. And then now I run a 6-figure revenue and profit getting business every year in one of the most expensive cities in the country. And for me, that is like such a cool thing. And I don't ever want to take it for granted. And I love helping other creatives get there through my podcast, The Bearded Tog, where I help people, mentorship, all that kind of stuff. And then naturally, I'm a DC wedding photographer, shoot about 40 weddings a year, most years in the district. and live right outside of where Marvin Gaye was born in Deanwood with my wife, Sarah, our dog, Cash, and hopefully soon our son, and who's coming in the next few weeks as we record. So I'm just excited. And after 2021, which was hard for all of us, like 2022 is looking good and looking bright. And we're here with the Legal Paige. So I'm really excited.
Yay. I love your background. You have such a cool, interesting story. And if you guys cannot tell, he's got the sickest podcast voice ever. I am super jealous of the Bearded Tog's podcast voice. It's just amazing. I'm jelly beyond belief, but I'm here being the host to the Bearded Tog, which is so cool on my behalf. I'm like, oh my gosh, you get to be a guest on my podcast. It feels awesome. You're like one of my dream guests, and I'm very, very happy for you to be here. But you guys, we were chatting about, okay, how do we want this podcast episode to go? And Adam and I were talking through like, well, we could talk about legal situations. We could do the scare tactic for people. We could just talk about contracts, but that's kind of boring. And I do it on every episode. I think what's more important is to have an expert in the industry here to help us really understand just how to be better business owners and how to like let things go that could potentially be sticky, that you're so all consumed with and emotional about, but really you can be a better business owner by avoiding certain things with quality customer service. So Adam, when did you realize that customer service should come before having the best photos out there, having quick editing turnaround, having the best website, having a bomb-ass social media account? Like, why is customer service so important as the number one?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll give two answers. So one will be short and one will be long. But the short one is a quote that I think, I forget who it's from, but you've heard this before if you've been in like motivational speaking world or church world. But it's like, people will never care how much you know until they know how much you care. And then there's the other one that's like, people will never remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And for our such a legacy-based business that is wedding photography, right? Like this is once in a lifetime for most people. This will never happen again for them. And I think even after the last 2 years, like photos have gotten even more important because certain people just can't come to your wedding, or maybe they're not available, or they're honestly like, not to get into mandates, but you know, some people, hey, they've opted to skip out on their vaccine, so they're opting to skip out on a wedding depending on the location. And for that, the photos are the only thing that are going to like show and feel what it was like there. So the customer service, I realized early on, probably like 6 years ago into my 10-year journey, that like my personality and customer service was not just a benefit of my current clients, but it was something that was attractive, you know, like one, just meeting the expectations that you set. Honestly, like doing what you say and having integrity and saying, hey, I'm going to deliver within 30 days and, you know, deliver within 30. And then if you want to take it up a notch and have good customer service, like deliver in 29 days. You know, it's not too crazy, but people will be so excited. You know, at the time of this recording, we shot a wedding on Sunday. And because we have a crazy editor, we just delivered the wedding, you know, like 4 or 5 days later, and the bride is ecstatic and she's already written us a review and that kind of stuff. And all that to say, that bride now is going to be an ambassador for us and literally like word of mouth, shout our praises, all that stuff. All the vendors have gotten their images, which is a whole other topic. And like, they all think, wow, Adam Mason's really put together, that he's really fun to work with. He's a nice guy. He's like, I've even taken photos of like wedding planners and their teams on wedding day, just in like 2 minutes, you know, and, you know, trying to serve everybody because those are our coworkers who we're going to work with for like the next 20 years. So long story short, that is like my big thing, is to step in the gap for my couples and their perspective and try to just understand where they're coming from. And then at the same time, help them along the way. Like when we bought a house, this is a kind of short anecdote. When we bought a house, we bought it through Redfin, which if you've ever bought a house through Redfin, you don't have a real realtor. Like they're real, but you're not, they don't make a commission off of your home. They're a salaried employee. And then they're also really a big tech company. And so they had this kind of dashboard that showed the timeline of what was about to happen as you're buying the house. Like, hey, here are the documents we're going to need at this time. Here's what you're going to need to do at this time. This is when we'll meet. This is when we'll do this. And so I took that approach to wedding photography because like everybody's kind of maybe bought a house, but it's always different until you do it. Everybody's kind of gotten married before, but it's always different until you do it. Same thing with having a kid. And a lot of people have had the favor of doing that. And so what can I do to help them just know that they're on the right track and kind of just be there for them? And it's been so great. Every couple honestly says I'm the most put together vendor. Like they never know that they never think that they're not going to get an email from me. Like all my mentees know I send 27 emails for every wedding client. Yeah. And that's without like replies and stuff like that. But again, like they don't have to read it, but I'm just trying to say, hey, just FYI, this is what's going to happen. Or, hey, I'm rooting for you. Is there anything I can do to help? So this is a really long answer, but all of that, like I could take crappy photos on wedding day, which hopefully I don't, but they'd be like, we just love Adam. These are cool. He made us feel, so great. And then these photos feel cool. And then if people trust you, they'll like you on wedding day and they'll feel more comfortable with you. And then the photos turn out better anyway. So long story short, like if you get people to feel comfortable with you prior to the wedding day, it's going to make a better product for you. So it was kind of a selfish ambition, but it really helps.
No, and it really, 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 really helps to not have clients get mad at you, which ultimately ends up in legal hot water or pre-legal hot water, which we're going to get into. So I'm just glad that you actually had a long drawn out answer for that, because people need to know all of that. They need to know what's happening with the entire process. And I think the more communication and the more customer service you can give, you're just literally avoiding red flag situations. So let's start from the beginning, because I just want to know what you do. And I'm very intrigued by it. Could you take us through your onboarding process, or at least like a minor rundown before the client even signs? Like, what are these touch points you're hitting on your website? Or what is the communication style and customer service you're giving them prior to them even getting to the legal document?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of this is going to feel a little businessy, which is like my kind of background as far as like actually gaining more business, but it kind of works out the same way. So for me, it starts with that inquiry, right? The goal is to get people to make these what's called micro commitments. And we're not trying to make them, DM us on Instagram and then saying, hey, here's your contract, give me $10,000. We're trying to take it slow. I always approach it kind of like dating, to where you're like, hey, we just want to swipe right and just be like, hey, how's it going? Or drop a funny meme or a funny emoji. And so long story short, they're going to give me an inquiry. My inquiry form right now, I've been in business for a long time, is pretty big, asks a few more questions than maybe other photographers who are starting out. But I want to get to know them, what their plans are, what kind of investment they have. And I think most of my couples like that because they know that I am an intentional business. They can tell from my work, my relationships with my couples. Like, I wouldn't say I'm a best friend photographer, but they know that I take my job really freaking seriously. And so that inquiry form starts there. Once they fill that out, literally within 5 minutes of getting it, I respond immediately. And so Wedding Wire has a stat that's like, if you'd respond to an inquiry email within 5 minutes, that's 95% chance you're going to book it. Versus I know people who like wait 2 days, and maybe it gives them anxiety to answer an email, but like I just have a template, no shame, no foul. I have a little template, answers some of their questions, assures them that one, I got the email, that I read something in their email. And then the goal then, the next micro commitment for them is to get on a phone call and just chat, no pressure, all that kind of stuff. If they don't answer that email, I send some follow-ups. I always joke that my CRM chases them down, because they're just automatic. And it's like, listen, I will find out why you didn't email me. I don't care if you're busy, vacationing, whatever. Like, I will find out. Or I'm too expensive or whatever. They booked a friend. The goal is to get to that phone call, and then that phone call, I'm treating them as if they're new. I'm not treating them as like me as a salesperson. I just want to talk about wedding stuff, what they need, what they don't need. One of my lines I always say on the phone too is that like, I'm more of a pragmatist, not a salesman. Like, I don't want to sell them anything they don't need. Like, I want to be intentional and have impact on what they're looking for, and make sure that they're stress-free. So if they only need 8 hours, hey, let's make those 8 hours the best freaking 8 hours of your life. What can I do to do that? And after that call, I send even more emails, info, follow-up, right? I always tell couples, I'm like, hey, we live in D.C. Everybody's type A. You don't have to take any notes if you don't want to. I'm going to send over everything we've talked about. And again, a lot of this is templated, right? Because we're doing this all the time, right? Like I get 500 leads a year. So like I'm naturally doing lots of calls and lots of emails. So do your templates, kids. And then after that, they kind of have a yes or no opportunity to say like, hey, let me know what package resonates with you most, or if you have any questions. So all of that is pre-contract, pre-saying, yes, we will go on a first date with you,
so many nuggets of wisdom there. I'm just like, oh my God, I wish Adam was my photography business coach when I first started. So you guys are literally getting gold right now. So yeah, you're really showcasing customer service from the get-go and building that massive know, like, and trust prior to them signing a legal document. And that's what I wanted to hit home here was that's really, really important, you guys. Because I see, and Adam, I would love your take on this. How many photographers do you see out there that they only really care about the dotted line and getting them to sign so they can book that day on their calendar? And like, sometimes I feel like they're not people-centered photographers and they're more just like booking-centered photographers, or like they really just want to create art and they don't really care about the process and they're just trying to get two people at this one location to showcase their work, or they're really worried about the like photography and the art behind it and not the people behind it. That's my question to you is, what if you just like miss all of these steps at the beginning? Like what are your clients ultimately thinking, and what are you missing as a photographer there?
Yeah, I mean, without getting too graphic, I mean, that kind of scenario is, if it was equivalent to dating, that's just booty call culture, or hookup culture. And for people who are expecting that, that's totally fine. Consensual, happy, everybody's having a good time. That's great. But weddings and wedding photographers, like most of my couples, I book between 11 and 15 months out. And, outside of my wife, those are the longest relationships I've ever had are with my couples. That's a long 15 months, man. Especially in D.C. I mean, you're basically like a senator by the time you date for somebody for 15 years, or 15 months, and so I think for photographers that I see, and I see a lot of them, I've mentored a bunch. We have about 1,700 in our Facebook group and stuff like that. And a lot of them, the ideal for a photographer is to kind of be like a Kanye West or a Taylor Swift at this point, where they could just create what they want and then people will like it. But I think people forget that like, those artists had to start from the beginning, or like Taylor was writing her first album at 14. Sorry for non-Swiftie fans, but she was grinding and working, and you want people to resonate with that work and that character. And now people do resonate with her and do resonate with that character, and in addition, the work. And so I think like artists, we want to have it just be about the art. And I can only name one photographer who's successful at doing this, and he's been doing it for 15 years, where he just says, hey, here's my work. If you like it, here's the contract. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions, and some couples think that's okay. But I will say though, that he unfortunately doesn't get to charge as much as I think he could. His work is great. And I think he knows the answers, but he's lacking the client experience, right? Like Caitlin James famously always said, hey, my work is only worth about $3,200, but my client experience is worth about $10,000, and I think like, that is so important. And that's not just like, we'll get to this probably, but it's not just like a thank you gift or a Starbucks gift card. But again, it's like, how do we actually serve? What are your clients' fears, right? If you're a photographer, or wedding photographer, they're scared about like, do I need to look good in photos, right? Like it feels so weird. My first goal isn't art, but my first goal is flattery. I want people to look good. I want them to feel good, man. If I make people look good, they'll be like, Adam is my guy. They're like, they're like, hey, we got to keep you around. You always take good photos of me, and that's awesome. And I want to make people feel that way. And then two, it is one of those situations where, hey, this is a wedding day. They're dealing with parents, all kinds of crazy stuff. And a lot of couples too, they don't talk about it, but like by the time wedding day comes, they're ready to get it done. They're feeling lonely. They're feeling kind of bitter. And I want to step in there and be like, hey, screw all of this. We're going to make this a happy, awesome day. We're going to make it awesome. So long story short, I keep saying that, but it's like, it's so important and so crucial. And I just think you can get a lot more out of it. The photographers that I've met, and I've interviewed a ton and talked to a ton, the photographers I've met who are booking 5-figure weddings, who are doing a low number of them, maybe 10, maybe 12 a year. They have insane customer service, insane client experience, insane branding. And the ones that don't, they're the ones who email me and they're upset that they can't break out of the $2,500 market, the $2,900 market. And I'm like, well, your website's just about you. It's not about how you're serving. Or let me see your client contract. And it just says, I will take photos for this amount. Thanks. We need to go further.
Well, what are the brands that we consistently are drawn to? The ones that make us feel really, 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 really good. And I'm willing to spend $50 on a t-shirt because I love their brand and I love their mission and I love everything about what they are promoting and what they do. And it's so people-centered versus the back-end business-centered. Okay, so you've done all this. You're making people feel really bomb. They really want to, they want to work with you. But you do have to get them to sign a legal document, which I think gives most wedding vendors the heebie-jeebies where they're like, okay, I am really good at my art and my craft. I am really good at working with people and building a business. But this has to happen in order for them to pay me a lot of money is they need to sign the contract. Take me through how you get people to sign the contract and make it not so like legal and yucky feeling and more like, this is just how we're moving forward in our relationship. We're on to date number 5. It is a little bit of a heavier date, but we got to talk. We got to talk about some things here. Like take people through that process.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. This is like in the dating world, like this is the DTR moment. Are you down for a relationship? Down to relationship where, again, we talked about those photographers that are DTF. This is not them.
For sure.
Anyway, this is too much fun. I'm so sorry for your editor. He's just going to cut all of it. No, but so the one thing too, now in DC, like a city of lawyers, we're expected to have a contract too. I feel like most couples, if I didn't have a contract, they probably wouldn't book me. They'd be like, what? Because honestly, too, your contract should set the expectations for your clients again in there as well. Like once they do read it, and if they read it, which is a whole other topic of conversation, but if they read it, that is the goal, is to, make sure, how are you going to protect them? What boundaries have you set in place that you're going to honor for them? Maybe that's turnaround time. If you can't show up, what's going to happen? COVID, all that kind of stuff, making sure that happens. So for me, once a client knows what package they're going to go with, and we've answered the like, how do we book and pay? And do you need a deposit? All those kind of questions. I say, awesome, great. We answer those. I just say, hey, I'm going to send over some next steps for you guys. And we can really, make this official, right? Which they're in a relationship. They know what make it official means. And that sounds a lot less scary than like, we're going to sign a contract where you give me thousands of dollars and I'll never give it back, or something like that.
So true.
Yeah. And so, I usually say next steps. And I think Sam Jacobson is a big fan of like not saying contract, but saying agreement, I go back and forth though, because I'm in DC. Like people expect, I'm surprised I don't have to buy a coffee without signing a contract here. So, that's just the name of the game. But once I send all those next steps, I'm gathering some information. They already know that I'm going to send them a gift, right? They don't know exactly what it's going to be, but they know I'm going to send them something in the mail. So I ask for different stuff, ask for their Instagram handles as well, so I can follow them. And then once they sign, they automatically get a welcome email that is like probably my biggest email. And it's, 7 or 8 points where it's like, here's what to expect. Here's what's next. And it says like, hey, for your engagement session, because that's the number one thing they're thinking about. People book us when they're thinking about getting engaged, which is really weird, or thinking about having engagement photos done. And then I'm always like the bearer of bad news. I'm like, oh, availability is 4 months from now. And they're like, oh, what? But, it's fine. And so they, I tell them, hey, I'll email you to schedule your engagement session in the next 7 days, right? So I'm already like, hey, this is what's going to happen. But also too, I say like, take some time to look at some more stuff and get excited for your wedding. So like, and it's not salesy, but it's like, hey, if you're looking for something that's cool for your guests that don't like to dance, here's our cool photo booth, right? It's not about like, hey, give me more money. But I'm like, hey, what about those guests that aren't on the dance floor all the time? And then like, hey, have you guys thought about something to give your parents after the wedding day is over for helping support you through this process? Parent albums. Here's a link to our album info. And then other fun stuff like our first look information, timelines, all that stuff that they'll get in the wedding guide as well. But if they're ready to chew on stuff, I want to give them as much as possible. And my big thing too, we've talked about this personally before. My big thing is our company value is set the tone. And if I don't set the tone, again, this goes back to relationships. If you don't set the tone, someone else will. If you don't love them, feed them, care for them, honor them, respect them, someone else will. If you don't set the tone, that's where the not.com comes in. It says, this is what your photographer should be doing. This is where their bridesmaid comes in and says, this is what your photographer should be doing. I don't want that to happen. I want me to set the tone. And then they say, well, our photographer said in order to get these results that we booked them for, that we have to do this, right? If you want gorgeous sunlit, backlit, romantic portraits, we got to do this at sunset, homie. I can't be out there at noon fighting with the shadows, trying to make y'all look amazing. And I can work in that because I'm professional. But if you ever were upset, I'd say, well, like, I gave you the ingredients, but you only put a few into the dish. So I'm a big analogy guy. But so yeah, all of that just helps set the expectation so that they go, okay, Adam's got us on the right track so that like we know what we're going to expect. And honestly, like, I can't put a value on that, but I know it makes people feel like, wow, okay, we're doing this and it's going to be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, to bring this all back around, I feel like what you're doing for people prior to signing a contract is, one, telling them the things that they don't know that they need to know before signing a contract. And then it's a no duh moment. It's like an innate thing that they're so easy to send the contract to. They're going to sign. There's not going to be any questions because you've answered them all before. Or if there is, that open line of communication is already there. That tone is already set. And it's like a relationship. I feel like we have this overarching theme in this episode, which I love because I can go back to it. And I feel like what you're doing is you're telling people, like, I don't want to date anybody else. I really, really want to give it a go with this person because I truly, truly like them. And then you're making it official and you're ready to do that. Like, it's not they don't question it. That's what you don't want clients to do, is question it when you're giving them a legal document. And I think that's really important customer service wise, is it's not like, here's a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo. That's actually, we're in like a binding contract now, or binding agreement, if we want to call it agreement. Yeah. And that does give people a little bit of anxiety. It's different than a relationship where there is no like sign on the bottom dotted line unless you're signing a prenup. But like, other than that, you're not doing it in a relationship. Like, you can back out at any time. But I think when there's dollars, a lot of thousands of dollars involved, there's a lot of services you're performing as a company. They're putting together basically a whole production on one day. There's expectations that need to be set on both ends in a contract that makes sense. Why you have to sign on the bottom dotted line for both parties. That's different than a relationship. But I love this customer service leading up to it.
One thing I was going to say, based off what you just said, was, I think too, a lot of photographers or creatives, when somebody's about to book and they're asking some questions, right? How do we book and pay? What's their deposit? How many photos do we get, right? I think some people get defensive, right? They're nervous. They're like, oh man, like, what magical answer is going to help me get this? Or if they ask questions about turnaround time, or what happens if, again, COVID, absence, act of God, whatever. One, I just pull from my contract for my answers. No, I don't say, hey, this is in the contract, but I just have an answer that aligns with that. And again, like you said, a no duh moment is when they get to that paper or the digital contract, they just say, oh yeah, we talked about all these things. There's no surprises in there, I don't think, unless they chose to ask. And I think that helps. I think a lot of people are just nervous to give that answer or again, hear no. But again, going back to boundaries, like, hey, it's okay. Like, they expect you to know the answers and they expect everything to be aligned, and they don't want you to kind of skate around the answer. They want you to have a real good answer. So that's still my one little thing.
No, I love it. I love it. I want to talk about boundaries now. I think my question was going to be along those lines. My question was going to kind of be like, well, okay, you've signed the contract, you've built this relationship, but now they're like poking the bear a little bit, or there's things that annoy you about this relationship. And so one party is coming to the other party or doesn't know how to communicate, and you don't want it to bubble up. We're literally using a dating analogy throughout this whole episode. I literally feel like that's how it is with wedding clients, is sometimes the other party is terrified to tell the other party what their issue is with them, or what is coming up, or how to communicate effectively to resolve this issue so it doesn't end up in like this huge blow up, which could end up in a fight, which could terminate your relationship. Like, that's what you're trying to avoid with customer service. And I don't necessarily I don't want you to take us through, okay, now you book the client with a contract, and like, what are your next customer service steps? And then what do you do post-wedding? But what happens, Adam, and what would you suggest to people where it's like, you've done all you can, but you might have a client that ends up not being your ideal client later on, or you want to kill them with kindness, but maybe customer service isn't the answer at that point. What are some suggestions there? And I think it has a lot to do with boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So hopefully everything we just talked about is to hopefully avoid situations like this, right?
Yeah.
And again, we joke about this relationship, but again, hey, we're trying to address any potential red flags before we sign into a commitment, right? And we're trying to help set the expectation. We don't want there to be any confusion, right? A good example too would be like a self-conscious client who asks, hey, do you do any retouching to the photos or something like that? And there's no right or wrong answer. The wrong answer is just a obtuse or not clear answer. The right answer is an answer that is direct. And so like you guys could totally have my answer if it aligns with you guys. I say, hey, if it wasn't there 2 weeks ago and won't be there 2 weeks after, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. But as far as like making somebody lose 30 pounds or catering to a mom that's nervous about her wrinkles, listen, those are just from laughter, baby. Like we're keeping them. And I set that expectation. I'm not a Vogue person. I'm not a Vogue photographer. I'm not even good at that. Like I'd probably just make people look worse and then I'd be a whole other legal situation. But if you come into that situation or scenario where you feel like you've done everything you possibly can, it depends. When I was first starting out, and I don't have a better answer for this, honestly, it's probably for bigger reasons, but let's say you're just starting out and you're single, you don't have any other income coming in. Sometimes I would eat it. I'll try to provide, value, right? Incentive, or be like, hey, I'm so sorry that happened or whatever. If it really is a failure on your part, and try to do everything you can to keep all monies paid at least, and maybe just provide value. Hey, can we do another shoot in your wedding outfits? It depends on what the scenario is. Now, at the same time, like it could be something where I had an associate shoot family photos and they didn't take just like the bride's immediate family, right? Like mom and dad and brother. But we had all those other members. And so like the mom was upset and I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Like, let me take another look through our gallery or through the raws and just see. I couldn't find them. And honestly, my first email back was, hey, I'm so sorry that happened. It happens sometimes and it's awful. I'm so sorry. I hope the other ones bring you a lot of joy, which some people will be like, oh, that's crazy. But I just sometimes people just want to be heard, right? Yeah. And then she emailed me back again and she was just like, hey, like, is there any way you could combine us from different photos and put us in there, right? From the same family photo location at least. And I was like, ugh, I'm not really good at retouching. And so I just said, hey, I'd love to refer you to the team that I would use. And that's retouchup.com or whatever website you want to use. And unfortunately, they don't take clients, like regular clients. They only take photographers. So she was like, hey, they won't allow me to submit something. So I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, yeah, let me see if they can do it. And long story short, for $12, I solved what could have been a really angry, upset mom problem.
Yeah.
And like, it took retouch up a few times, but like once it passed my own quality standard, I said, hey, I'm so sorry. Like, here you go. And then like my favorite thing to do is to offer a print credit because it literally like costs me nothing. It adds value. And then like she wants this photo because she wants a print, right? Like she wants to have this image forever. And so she's about to give me money, after she's done being upset. And so that was the easy solve. There are some clients too, where depending on the timing, right, in your contract and stuff like that, if it just doesn't feel like it's going to work out and you're both sucking too much time out of each other, or they're taking away more time than they've paid for from you, if you're able to, like I've fired couples before, only a handful over 10 years, but we're trying to serve them too. Like you're going to be happier and they're going to be happier. Like, hey, I'd love to find you somebody that you have the trust with, all that kind of stuff. Or sometimes there's a miscommunication where they think that you're being too strict about your boundaries. And something I've learned over the last few years, and I've told some friends this, is in any healthy relationship, you can say no to something. You can present a boundary. And if you're in a healthy relationship with these clients, most of them will just know your boundaries by you setting them and you won't even have to bring it up. And then if these folks want to go past a boundary or are abusing those boundaries, again, we go back to relationship, that's an abusive relationship and we got to cut bait. We got to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And then you just try and find the most amicable way to do that. Now, if you haven't done any work for them, they're probably going to ask for that, retainer back. But if I was canceling on them, then I would probably give it all back, depending on what your policy is, just so that way you can be like, hey, I owe you nothing. I gave you more emails than you could ever, more phone calls, more time than you, like you're still in the disproportionate value stage, and say, I wish you guys well. I'm here for you along the way. So yeah, hopefully that answers. Specific questions and situations are always hard, but that's the general rule, is like, try your best. And then if you need to, like, cut ties, let them go, you know?
Yeah. Again, with dating, it's like, I think we can all,
Sorry.
I just am like, yes, Adam, this makes so much sense for people. And just to put it in like terms that everyone understands, we've all dated before to try to find our person. And
Hopefully. Shout out to the people still waiting.
Yeah.
I got your
Okay.
back.
We got, yeah, we totally understand where you're at right now. Adam and I are married, so we kind of are at a different stage in having babies, but we've all been there when we're like, is this going to work? I think you're always also, if you're in a relationship that maybe you don't have the communication style down and you're just butting heads consistently, potentially bickering or turning into fights, like you need to address that situation before it blows up and you break up, right? And so you don't want it to get there and escalate super quickly. And that's honestly what us lawyers are doing day in and day out. We're trying to avoid lawsuits. Like all day long, that is our job. Is what can we do? How can we settle this? Everything's behind the scenes where lawyers are talking to lawyers and businesses are talking to their clients in order to even avoid the lawyer to lawyer situation, right? Like if you have a relationship and a communication style and a tone, like you said, in that relationship with your client as the business owner, before they sign the contract and then after they sign the contract, it's going to be easier to resolve a situation amicably, where then you're avoiding bad reviews. Maybe you do have a policy where you're not mouthing it to everyone that you give refunds, right? You've got non-refundable retainer in your contract. But I always tell people like, there are situations where you absolutely should give a refund if you're the one canceling. Like you need to end those terms in the best way possible so that your clients are happy and they know that maybe you weren't a good fit and you are referring them out to a bunch of people. They've gotten a full refund. They know they can go find someone else. Like you guys can then, it's like in a relationship, sometimes relationships end in the dating world where you never want to see that person again. That's what you're trying to avoid, I would say, as a business owner and as a photographer and as a wedding vendor, because the moral of the story is we're trying to make happy clients give us good referrals so that we get more bookings. And I would say you want to set a tone after, like before all these contractual issues may come up or legal situations. You're trying to avoid lawyers getting involved. You're trying to resolve this on your own as a business owner so that relationship-wise, if you're talking about a dating analogy here, you can see each other in a grocery store and say hi and be happy for one another and not like never want to see this person again. I would say that's the tone that I hope people take away from this episode is things can be resolved and communication can happen with really good customer service so that you aren't ending up in consistent legal sticky situations. I don't want you to be there. That's what your contract is there to help you avoid and has all of the terms set in it as like a standard for, okay, well, what's happening here? Let's go back to clause number 17. But hopefully you don't even have to get there, right, Adam? Like how many times have you even had to do that with clients where you're pointing back to the contract versus just resolving it with them by talking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, three things. So one, like and I hate this, right? As a millennial, this is icky to do this, but it does just help with tone and being like, not apologetic, but being soft and gentle during customer service situations where like, get on the phone. That's the number one thing. Like if it starts to feel icky, if it starts to feel like, oh my gosh, or sometimes we get anxiety, right? Like, does this client like me? What's worst case scenario? They're going to burn my house down and murder me, right? Or whatever the worst case scenario is for you, like we think those irrational thoughts all the time, right? And or it's just me. And so but we need to hop on the phone, talk to them, talk through it and see if you can find a solution. The second thing too is like, I look at my contract as, I'll give two analogies, as like a backstop, right? So in baseball, right, you've got pitcher, he's going to throw the ball to the batter, and then the batter's going to hit it. If he doesn't, it goes to the catcher. And then either way, the umpire is between all those guys and the fans. as like a reference point, as the person who's keeping track of the rules. So that backstop is like the final thing. Like other than that, somebody's getting hit in the face with the ball if you don't have a contract. That's a good analogy for you there.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to use this at a speaking event. That was so good.
Honestly, my other thing I was thinking about is like in a car, there are these things called firewalls. And if the engine ever caught on fire, the firewall is in there in between you in the cabin and the engine to keep you from catching on fire or bringing harm to you guys. But hopefully we never have to get there. There's levels and things in between, and customer service is what's in between there. The other thing too, I would think about is, especially in DC, but wherever you live, like millennials are receipts level people. People are going to look for the receipts and hopefully try to see if they were right. And so for me, I always want to make sure that I've kept receipts and that mine are on, A game. I had a client last December, actually. Wedding was amazing. I loved their photos. It was one of my favorite weddings. I worked 15 hours for them. I flew there. It was rough, but it was like, I love the work that I got from it. And one thing I do, unless the client specifically tells me not to and pays for this service, but one thing I do is I send all the photos to the vendors automatically. Like every vendor on the wedding, I just send them the photos and I say, hey, use these to your heart's content. Here's my info. If you want to tag me, I'd love to share. But I love working with you guys. Here's all the photos. And the bride noticed that a vendor had posted some of their photos. So the bride DMs me on Instagram, and she just says, and again, you could tell by their tone. She didn't say, hey, Adam, I just wanted to check real quick if you kind of, blah, blah, blah. She goes, did you send our photos to all of the vendors? Anytime you see our like eye language, all that kind of stuff, you're cruising for a bruising, as my mom would say. And so I was like, oh, and so I had to respond nice. Like, we're trying to put the fire out. This isn't Game of Thrones. We're trying to pour water on it. And I said, oh yeah, I totally did that for you guys. Like all of the vendors work so hard. I always make sure that they get copies of the photos so they can use for marketing, especially after the last 2 years, right? If any of your clients have ever shared a support small business meme or like to shop at the farmer's market, hey, we are the farmer's market. We're a small business. Like, we're trying to get, support going, and sharing photos for free is an easy way to do that. And she was really upset. And she was just like, oh, I didn't know. You got to think of like, what's the issue? She thought that I had pulled one on over her or whatever I'm trying to say, like if I tricked her, right? But the funny thing about this particular client, this was before I got this is not an official plug, but this was before I got the TLP rescheduling and COVID clause in my contract. They had rescheduled twice for free. And for me, what that meant was they had read the same contract with the same model release that says I can do whatever with the photos three times. Yeah. So not even, hey, they just signed it once. They didn't really check it. They didn't initial, whatever. I'm like, you saw this 3 times. And so I think in my head, and I tell Paige this all the time, I'll DM her all the time about this. I'll say, oh, I would win because they've read the same thing 3 times. And, you just apologize. You'd be really nice. You say, and you assure them, hey, and she was just nervous about how she looked in one of the photos, right? Let's be real. It wasn't something.
What is the root of the issue, right? Is it really that you somehow violated a model release, or like, is there something personal going on?
Yeah. She was just upset. And I think too, it's like, hey, you got to empathize. Don't verbalize or don't internalize, verbalize. And so I just said, hey, I'm so sorry. But one thing I'll let you know though, is no wedding vendor on the planet has a business model that would support them exploiting or highlighting the ugly parts of our couples. Our jobs and our beliefs are that we are sharing people looking their absolute best, and we make our living off of that. So I assure you, none of this is malicious. And that kind of helped a little bit. Like, I always tell people when they're nervous, because people are nervous about photographers, right? If it's not a wedding photographer, it's usually paparazzi, especially in DC. Like, that's who our clients are interacting with. And I say, no. I am not paparazzi. I'm team you guys. I pay my mortgage making you all look good. Like, that is my goal. TMZ is not calling saying, hey, I'll give you $50K for this bad photo of them. Like, no. I'm trying to make hits. I'm trying to go platinum on all of these photos, basically. So that's my little anecdote, was that one bride. I'm like, she had read the contract 3 times. So it wasn't, and I checked. I was like, oh, was this an NDA client? And I just forgot, because that happens when you're busy. And I looked back and it wasn't. And I was like, well, I'm using those photos. Sorry, Sheila.
Yeah. And this, Adam, this has popped up so many times. I would say, I don't want to go down this tangent. Maybe we could talk about it for like 2 minutes. But I feel like privacy is becoming more and more of an issue. And you hit on it here where like model release clauses are very, very important to have in your contract. And I feel like it's commonplace to have like an open-end model release where it's irrevocable. They can use it. You can use it for all of your marketing and advertising purposes. And usually clients are just like skimming through contracts, signing the bottom dotted line and moving on. And they don't really look at that clause. However, I would say that over the past couple of years, I don't know why, and I don't know how this is becoming such a thing for every client to know to do this. But lots and lots of photographers are getting questions about privacy. And they're like, I don't want this type of model release in there. Or, I mean, you're dealing with high profile clients a lot of the time and celebrities or politicians and things along those lines in DC. But for people who are just lay people who want to protect their privacy, how would you suggest going about that in a customer service way? I'm just curious because we've had this question probably 15 times in the past month about my client wants to change my model release in my contract. They actually are reading the contract. They are reading that clause, you know, kind of going backwards, like your client was okay with it, right? They saw your contract 3 times. But what happens if a client comes and says, I don't want you to share my photos? And then you're like, oh, shoot. Like, well, what am I going to use for my marketing and advertising? I'm just interested in your take on that because legally speaking, there's an answer to that. And you guys, we have an entire blog post on it because I get this question all the time. So I will make sure that that's linked in the show notes for you. But from your standpoint as an expert in the industry and an expert at customer service to avoid this dealing with this clause situation in a contract, what would you suggest for people?
Yeah. Can you whittle down the scenario for me to, and this will just help, I can do both, but it'll probably help us save time. Is this pre-contract, they're about to sign and have some questions? Or is this post-signing and, you know, they saw a blog come out?
Yeah, I think well, let's do both because I think the issue is honestly very either or. So let's start with what happens if your client reviews the contract and then they're like, actually, we're really private people and we don't want you to use our photos. But you have a base model release clause to the effect that I just said, where it's like very unlimited.
Totally. Yeah. So I have a 3-tiered system and clients can fall into 3 options. So the number one thing is what we said, where it's basically unlimited. We can use it for blogging, advertising, all that kind of stuff. And I think clients get nervous when they might see that, depending on if they're an anxious person or not. And they might think like, oh, we're going to put their worst photo ever on a billboard. And the caption's just going to say, you know, we're just laughing at them. Like we want them to feel absolutely awful. And again, that might just be a reminder of the business model. Be like, hey, like literally pay my DC mortgage, my single income household by making people look and feel their best. And I've worked with hundreds of clients and if they're nervous about their weight, I say, hey, I'm overweight. You could trust me. If they're hairy, tall, short, big, whatever, you know, you can show them photos, blogs and stuff of how you made other people feel beautiful. I remind all my clients that I've never, ever, 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 this might not apply to you, but I've never, ever photographed a model before. Like everybody's been an amateur, regular person. Like I've never been to a styled shoot and shot, all that kind of stuff. So for me, that's something I like. And that's not to say if you've done styled shoots that you can't not say that, but you know, adjust it to your level of ethics. Be honest for sure. So I try to assure them of that. And in DC, I've done both things. So I have a lot of politicians and then you shoot one NFL player's wedding and then naturally it spurs around. So like you start shooting these other kind of high profile and it just goes back and forth to a weird scenario. So then the second tier is I say they're kind of nervous or maybe there's a certain member at the wedding, right? Or like I had a client where President Obama was officiating. And so they had some specific questions. Things would have to be cleared by Secret Service, his marketing team, all that stuff. You have other people at events, different senators, whatnot. And I say, hey, the second tier is understanding that I need these images for marketing promotion to the help of my business. You know, and again, it sounds like beating a dead horse, but I always say like after the last 2 years, like we're still recovering. Like I need business. And it's not to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm like, hey, like hear me out. And again, especially with my market, they've shared a small business meme. So I'm like, hey, help us out.
I was going to say, you've got politicians, like just say, I'm a small business. Hi, help me.
Yeah. Like this small business Saturday, if you're not thinking about me, you know, you better. No. That's the small business person's Valentine's Day. I just realized Small Business Saturday. So I hope you guys buy me something nice. And so that's the second tier, is just asking them, hey, could I run by you the photos that I'm thinking of sharing?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have your approval. How would that go? Most couples will say, yeah, as long as you put that in the contract, I think we're down with that. And I say, can we just have a guaranteed number? Maybe that's just 15, or maybe that's just 10, just enough for an Instagram carousel that looks cool. And I can only ever use those 10. But at least for me, I know I'm going to take at least 10 bangers at the wedding. That's my goal. And, that'll be enough for me. So some couples are like, okay, cool. That sounds really good. And then if they want nothing shown, and again, there are some people who I think deserve this. There are some people who I think don't need this at all, and they're full of themselves. And then I do think privacy too plays into it, to where like last year with a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and, racial reconciliation kind of protests, the problem is that facial recognition software owned by the military and police scans our social media. And if you see a protester or anything like that, or like there's probably facial recognition profiles on us if you've gotten like other criteria. If you've gotten a speeding ticket and then also tied to your name, so like not to be conspiratorial, but that might be a thing. And again, in DC, people might be nervous about that, especially if you're a protester or whatever. And so it really depends. So long story short, though, unless they have a reason that just makes me be like, okay, yeah, that sounds good, I usually say, hey, we can totally do that. We could do a non-disclosure agreement, clause. And I say, but I do charge for that.
Yeah.
And so for me, that fee is 10% of the package, basically. And so, if they've chosen a $10,000 package, hey, it's just $1,000, because marketing, promotion are built into my packages. And, I'm trying to put food on the table for my baby, my upcoming baby, and my French bulldog. And, that's kind of my mindset. So 3 tiers, and that is for pre-contract. Post-contract, it's going to be a little bit more delicate of a dance. All right. This is not the empowered Taylor Swift. We're going back to younger, little bit, more gentle Taylor Swift. And I honestly, if a client was like upset that they had signed that, I would probably try to push them to the second level and just be like, hey, would you feel comfortable with us going over a few images that we really love? Or is there a specific image that you just want taken out, right? Because again, what's the reason? They might tell you it's because they're medium-sized fish in a small pond where they live. And they're like, oh yeah, I was in the local newspaper and I'm kind of a public figure. Or they just don't like how their arms look, and they just don't add, I think that's the only issue when you start having we just hit 10,000 followers on Instagram last year. And that's the only issue. If I post a photo to that many people that somebody might feel like it is unflattering to them, that could feel funky to them. I could see how that could feel weird. Like, oh, all these people are going to see it. But we know that that's not the case necessarily. And like people who follow me are expecting whatever. They're like, oh, wow, they're not looking at somebody's arms, most of the time. So
yeah,
you just got to find out the reason. And I would try to get to level 2. If they weren't down with that, I'd probably be like, guys, I can't do much more. I can only go to this level and compromise based on this thing that you guys signed. But again, I'm willing to compromise. Like, hey, give me 15 images and let's go for it. Or I could charge them the NDA fee after. Be like, hey, I'd be happy to do that for you and archive the gallery, like make up some term for it. And hey, that'll be $1,500. Thanks. And just see where that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All of this is so good. So a couple things I want to hit home on, because they literally
ELP
are one,
ever.
It's legal heavy, but also I think this issue just pops up so much and people don't know what to do. The first thing that you have said that I want everyone to know is you have to be in control of the images that you're sharing. So like tier 2 that Adam was saying, where you are selecting the 10 to 15 images that you want to use and asking your clients for approval, do it that way and not the other way. Don't let the clients choose 10 to 15 photos that you can share, because 1, you'll never get a response back. Like they're going to take forever to choose. And 2, like you, this is like fast. We need this to happen quickly. You need to get their like highlight images out on social media. The second thing is I think there's a lot of people in the industry, and I would love to talk to them for a bit and figure out why they feel this way. But they're like, it's people's privacy. We need to respect it. There's no other answer other than take the model release clause out. And I'm always like, no. I don't think that is the answer. Like, are you actually being a business owner here? Are you thinking like a business owner here? And I think Adam really hit home like this, we're small businesses. This is our marketing and advertising materials. It is our only marketing and advertising materials. Unless you want to go do a bunch of styled shoots. And Adam's like, that's not the business I run. Like my business is people-centered and these are the people that I'm consistently shooting. And that's the marketing and advertising photos I want out there in my portfolio online. And so there has to be this like middle tier where you're like, I would say always drive people there pre-signing the contract if they're worried about the model release clause, like give your best customer service on like why you want to amend the model release clause so that it's not completely open-ended, like unlimited images, but it's somewhere, within the 10 to 20 realm where they're going to be happy with that. And then you get their approval and good, everything's good afterward. But maybe, for the second scenario that we're talking about where people are upset afterward, there's usually a very good reason why. And you just have to put your people hat on and not your business or your, CLO, chief legal officer hat on and be like, oh, but my contract says that this is what the clause says. And, this is how it's going to go down. Like, that's not the way to go about this. And hopefully that's the gist you guys are getting from this episode is your contract is there as the backstop, but there's ways to resolve issues prior to you being like, no, this is the legal terms in my contract. Sorry, that's it. I don't necessarily, and I don't give a lot of opinions out on my episode because I try to see both sides. I try to be the legal page and the lawyer where I'm understanding where people are coming from. That's what us lawyers do is we always have to argue both sides of things. I don't agree that like getting a model release clause completely cut out of a contract is the way to go. I don't think that there are situations like Adam said where privacy is of the utmost concern. We're talking like, we're talking Obama here. We're talking presidents. We're talking like high profile celebrities. But I know people that I've actually done NDAs and like specific model release clauses for that have shot celebrities. And they've still been able to massage a little bit for that like middle tiered approach that you were talking about, where they probably want the images of their faces and of their family and all of that to like sell to People magazine and make a shit ton of money. So you need to be compensated for that because they're probably going to have full authority, which is what they want from their photos. But for those celebrities too, oftentimes they'll let you use photos where their faces aren't in it. And you just may not know that they're okay with that. And you might still have like an epic sunset night image or something where their faces aren't on there. And the last thing that I wanted to point out here, Adam, and this can be the very last thing we talk about because this episode is getting long. But I think people have sometimes we're a yes society, like a do it now society. We got to get this done. And we're not forward thinking enough. And I hope as business owners that you will steadily become more and more and more forward thinking. And if you are just so, okay, yes, no problem, I'm going to take my model release clause out. Like, did you even think about the potential of like that one photo at that one venue that you could get that would literally blow up your business? And now you're stuck with the fact that you don't have that model release clause because you negotiated that with your contracts from the get-go. You have no foresight into what that image is actually going to look like on their wedding day. And what if this is the wedding that you absolutely want to share and you've cut off your ability to do that? I tell people like that's probably not a good way to go about business at the beginning prior to signing the contract. And I don't know if you agree with that, Adam, but I've seen situations like that happen so many times where then photographers are kind of shit out of luck, to say it in like very specific terms. And you want to have some like leeway there, right? A way to massage the model release so that it fits your business and fits your client's privacy concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not to say that, like Paige said, that there are photographers out there, like I've interviewed John Dolan and Sam Blake, and they've shot Will Smith's wedding or Gwyneth Paltrow's wedding or Chris Martin's wedding, all that kind of stuff. It's not to say that those people don't have NDAs or certain kind of very particular model release kind of thing set up in their agreements. But the thing is those people are also being compensated, right?
Oh yeah,
those
those are like $20,000, $30,000 weddings. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like John Dolan's number one rate is $40K and he does 6 to 10 a year. I'm like, wow, okay, great. That sounds wonderful. But he might be a little bit limited on what that looks like. But at the same time, again, like kind of work with these folks and ask them like, hey, or would you be willing to support a small business? And I think too, as photographers, if we all do this and set it as the standard for people who maybe, again, don't deserve it or whatever. And again, you'll know, like there were people who were in the news 2 years ago and then they booked me and then I had to have a certain NDA. Okay, that makes sense. Or they work for the CIA or the NSA or whatever.
Yeah.
Those are obvious ones. You just, as gently as possible, find a place in those 3 tiers I talked about. But again, like I think for me, it's trying to find that middle ground of trust, all that kind of stuff. And again, if it's not being sold to People magazine, it's just like, hey, remind them of the business model, remind them that we're there for them and that like we're team them. If it's Ben and Lauren or Sarah and Sean, like, hey, I'm team you guys. And I think it's really important that they know that. And again, for you have to decide if that's October 10th, 2020, and they're being icky about it and they're not sure. Bye, Felicia. Like that date's going to get booked. Yeah. Now, if that's a Tuesday in February or Thursday today, February 10th, a month after my birthday, then maybe you fight a little harder for that. And maybe you say, all right, whatever. But again, especially if you're newer to the industry too, like when I first started, I wanted one portfolio image from every wedding, right? Because you're only going to shoot 6 weddings in a year, 12 weddings in a year. I'm trying to build this really big stuff and help give direction to my brand. And so, yeah, like fight for that. That's what you do. People are commissioning you for art and then they don't want to show anybody that they had the art, that they got it. That's weird. And I think especially in this hyper-personal photographer world, like let's lean into that unless you just want to be a robot and nobody sees it. And again, as you get into business, that happens. Most of your favorite photographers in the world are shooting weddings that we'll never see.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. But it's okay they definitely wish that they could show you some more. So, and the other last thing I'll say, this is something we were thinking about earlier. This is why you need a community or like Facebook page, like the Legal Paige community, or you need like not even a mentor. This is not even selling like mentor sessions, but like I'm so grateful to have people I can talk to who are at the same level or just a smidge higher, a smidge longer, whatever. And I don't say, hey, can I pick your brain? But I'm like, hey, here's a very direct question. If we have to go deeper and I need to pay you for this, let me know. But like, let's talk about it. Or like buying a template from Paige versus booking her for consulting, right? Like find those levels. Or you just listening to the episode about it, right? Yeah. I think like, don't be afraid to reach out. And I think it's getting better in Facebook groups, but sometimes you're like giving an opinion for a whole crowd to judge on. And sometimes you just need to like have one of your people. So like, my mentees and people who listen to the podcast, like they text me all the time and they're like, hey, I'm dealing with this, or how do I work around this? Or how do I work with this? And it can be really helpful just to have somebody to like, who gets you and understands you. Again, just like any relationship, just to know that. So that's my one thing is like, if you don't have a buddy, get one, just like Toy Story.
I just want to end it there. I have one thing I want to say, though. You guys are like, Paige, of course you're going to say something. I'm just glad you nuanced that down because I do have like a very specific opinion on model releases because I was a photographer and I found it very important to use like the photos I took for marketing and advertising purposes. But I'm glad you then put it into 2 buckets for people because if you're, more experienced, you have a bigger portfolio, I think you're way better positioned to be able to negotiate model release clauses and privacy concerns for clients. And if you're at the point where you're like totally fine shooting 40K weddings for celebrities and they're giving you that much money because then they're going to go sell those photos to people, like that's fine. That's your business model. But I think I was wanting to come from a point of like the people who are in their first 0 to 3 years of business where those images are so, so important. I don't want, if you are in that season of your photography business, I just don't want you to fall prey or, be like put into a box or a position that you can't get out of with your model release causes too early on in your career. So just be aware of that. And Adam, I'm really glad that you nuanced that down after I had laid out my very specific opinion, but I think it was for the 0 to 3 photographers. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit. So you ended on Toy Story. Is there any last remaining pieces of advice that you want to end on? Because you're just like a wealth of wisdom here. And I don't want people to hear my voice as the last thing they hear on this podcast episode.
No, I love, hey, they're subscribed because they want to hear that voice. So I would say, over the last 2 years, even after doing this for 10 years, I've learned a lot. And I think one of the number one things I've learned, after interviewing over 100 photographers and, shooting 300 weddings or whatever, and the last few years is, guys, like, we're always nervous about the worst case scenario. But I honestly think that if you're doing the right thing and you're setting the right expectations, you have a proper contract that's a good backstop, right? Going back to that baseball analogy, you've set the proper expectations in the relationship. You're trying to make things not confusing and you're honestly trying to serve. I think even the worst case scenario in our mind, right, is like us going to court, getting a 1-star review, and a bride or a client like posting on social media that we're the worst photographer in the world and nobody ever should hire us, right? If that's worst case scenario for us, if we're doing the right thing and you try to do the right thing, maybe even gave them a refund or something like that or whatever, and your contract is set up, right? Make sure your backstop that they signed is set up and ready to protect you because it's ready to protect them as well. I wouldn't sweat it. I would just encourage you, like, kind of lean into the fear a little bit of saying no and say no, because the freedom that you have as a business owner and a person is only comes from you saying no to things. And I don't think without that freedom that you can escape burnout. And I think a lot of us are burnt out. I saw so many wedding photographers quit and get new jobs and they're giving it up forever after the last few years because of the customer service and how clients took advantage of us. And I'm not saying that like clients are the enemy. Like, we love our clients, but it's okay to have boundaries, just like in any relationship. And I encourage you, find those boundaries, enforce those boundaries, and kind of learn those and encourage other people to have those too. Because like, it's cheesy, a rising tide lifts all boats. If all of us have those similar boundaries, that's going to create a better environment for the industry. And again, like, we're all trying to be here for the long haul. I'm not, the relationship analogy of this episode is crazy. I'm not in it to hit it and quit it. I'm in this forever. I love my job and I love people. And I know you guys do too. So let's make sure that we're doing the right thing and then not be scared. Like, it would not be the end of the world if all wedding photographers had a 1-star review or two. Like, look on Yelp. There's no business that has 100% 5 stars.
Yeah,
right?
no,
like,
that's not a thing.
Somebody is upset that they went to the business when they were closed and they wouldn't open up for them. What are you doing? Like, they're closed. Like, it happens all the time. So like, don't be nervous. Step into it. And I hope that 2022 is the best year you've ever had because of that.
The slow clap is happening in my mind. Hopefully you can hear this through my podcast mic. Wow. Dropped so much info in this episode. Adam, if I was a photographer, I'd want to know where to find you, because if I was just starting out, I'd be like, hi, can you mentor me? Please, I need help. I'm not pitching your mentoring, or I don't even know if you do that, to be honest.
Pitch away. Yeah.
But I'm like, there's a lot here, and maybe people ask and request for a follow-up episode, because I just felt like that was pure butter and pure geniusness that just happened. But where can people follow you, find you? And do you have any like additional resources if people wanted more?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I would say, obviously this podcast, like, I wish that Paige and the Legal Paige was a thing when I first started. But instead, like, all of my experience and things I've learned have come from my mistakes that luckily I made a long time ago. And we're now in a good season of not making those mistakes, right? Take advantage of the resources that are around you. I always joke with people like, hey, you should go watch that workshop you paid for a year ago and haven't watched. Like, go do that. Or listen to that podcast episode that you've downloaded and subscribed and you're really excited about, but you haven't done the work with it. So take action, do that action. For me, you can find me on Instagram. That's the number one place that I hang out with, because I'm still a millennial, at Mason Photography, MASON Photography. DM me, say hi, tell me what you loved about the episode, follow up with questions. Like, I'm very interactive in there. And the second thing I would encourage you, if you're trying to nibble on more content and learn more about customer service, I would definitely direct you to my podcast, The Bearded Tog. There's over 170 episodes from all kinds of photographers, heroes, etc. We talk about everything. And then the next level of that, if you really have a unique situation or you really want to get, some customer service nailed down, I would say the next step is to do a mentor session. So you can just DM me on Instagram for info on that. We could do a deep dive, SEO audits, business audits, money, pricing, customer service, wedding guides, all that kind of stuff. And again, my philosophy is that you guys heard my story at the beginning of the episode. If I can do it, I believe anybody can do it. All it takes is the work. And so I'm there to help you unlock that. I've helped tons of mentees make tons of money, but also too, it's not about the money, but also again, saying no, preventing burnout and loving this freedom that we have to create and make a living off of it. And it doesn't have to be a starving artist living. So yeah, I'm here for you guys. I'm rooting for you, and come say hi either way.
Adam, you're a true joy. I love talking to you, and I hope everyone truly enjoyed listening as well. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise on this podcast episode. And we will all make sure we follow along with the rest of your business journey.
Woo! Thanks, Paige.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Paige Podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpaige.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.